Hi, everybody. We're just about at the 1 o'clock mark, so we're going to get started here. If you've been with our webinars before, you usually hear a quick little spiel from me, and then I'll turn it over to Grant to get started on talking to us about antifreeze. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's our third webinar of the year. I'm Jenny Novak, and I'm the marketing manager, and I coordinate the webinars here at Dyne Fire Protection Labs, which is now an NFPA Global Solutions company. Welcome back if you've joined us in the past, and thank you if it's your first webinar. We have quite a few people registered, so that's awesome to see. Just a quick note about us. We're an independent testing laboratory that's been testing firefighting foam for over 25 years. We also do dry chemical agents, sprinklers, and antifreeze solution, which we're going to be talking about today. We're always asked if we're certified or accredited, and Dyne is a ISO 9001 certified and has a 17025 accreditation by A2LA for automatic field sprinkler testing. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the chat window or the Q&A, whichever one you can get to. We will save them up for the end and have a little session at the end of the webinar content. Today's webinar, Periodic Antifreeze Solution Testing, will be presented by Grant Lobdell, who's the president here at Dyne and has an extensive knowledge and experience with the laboratory testing required by a variety of inspection, testing, and maintenance, otherwise known as ITM, standards. If you will stay to the end of the webinar, I do like to send out a certificate of attendance. Some people look for those either today or tomorrow. Some people use our webinar for NISAC credits. I've heard a few other things they're used for. This webinar is being recorded, and you will also receive a follow-up email separately from me with a link to the video that we publish on our Dyne YouTube channel. So watch for those after the webinar. And now I'd like to turn it over to Grant to talk to us about antifreeze solution testing.
Thank you, Jenny. So to get started, just like Jenny had some disclaimers, I got some disclaimers myself. We are going to be talking about NFPA standards today, in particular NFPA 25. And most of my references, I'll be referencing the current edition, which is 2023. You may be on 2020, 2017. But most of this information we're going to be referencing is the 2023 edition. I will make some comments on some previous editions, especially with antifreeze. There's been a lot of changes over the last several editions, so I will try to call them out as I go. But before we dive into it, I got to state that this webinar shall not be considered the official position of NFPA or of any of its committees, and shall not be considered to be nor relied upon as a formal interpretation. You might ask, well, how do I go get a formal interpretation? Let me show you. You go to nfpa.org, and this is also how you can participate in the NFPA process. Let's type in NFPA 25. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Right on the screen for NFPA 25, you can click Ask a Technical Question. You can get a formal interpretation right from NFPA. And I mentioned, again, the standards are written by the public. You can participate. Anyone can participate. You can go to next edition, and you could submit comments when it's open for comments. Right now, it looks like we're on the second draft. The comments just closed back in May, so they're going to digest all those comments. Committee will have a meeting on that. Then there'll be the 26th edition, and then start the cycle again. I believe this is every 3 years, it looks like, on a 3-year cycle. So. And then it'll come back open for comments. So anyone listening, you guys can submit if you disagree with something or feel something's not being addressed that should be. You can go on again, nfpa.org. You can ask your technical question, and next edition you can submit comments when it is open for comments. I have one other disclaimer, and this is specific to antifreeze. This comes right from the standard that the use of antifreeze solution shall conform with state and local health regulations. So again, we have some requirements in NFPA, but if there were, for some reason, ever a state or local regulation that would supersede this, you do have to follow those as well. So now that I get those out of the way, how I like to structure this, and if you've attended before, I usually do this once a year, and we'll get into why I do it around this time of year in a bit. But I like to start, well, why do we do it? You know, why are we here? Why are we talking about antifreeze? One, it's required by NFPA 25. I have that on the list, but that's not the real reason. I mean, NFPA has it in there for a reason, right? That's to, one, ensure we have adequate freeze protection, right? We're putting antifreeze in a system for a reason, to protect it from freezing. So I've got cold environment and I got water. I got the potential to freeze and my pipes will burst. I get a variety of solutions I can use to try to prevent that, right? I can try to not put water in it. I can have a dry system. I could use dry sprinklers and insulation, heat tracing, or antifreeze. So antifreeze is just one solution, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So why are we testing it? To make sure it'll work, make sure we have adequate freeze protection. There are things that can happen to antifreeze solution as it sits in your system, or it'll no longer provide that protection you need. Again, you put it in thinking, oh, I can go down to -10. You got a leaky valve or something, you got some water, for some reason someone drained it and didn't know there was antifreeze in it and refilled it just with water. All of a sudden you lost all your protection, right? So you want to make sure we test that to make sure you aren't going to have those burst pipes, you aren't going to have those problems. Now, how does antifreeze, or when we say antifreeze, how does that work? We're putting a chemical in that's going to lower that freeze point. Unfortunately, most of what we use for antifreeze to lower that freeze point in itself is a combustible or ignitable liquid. So we have to be careful we don't have too high of concentrations. All right, we talked about, okay, I can put in 30%, get down to -10, great. I need -20, I'm just going to put in more propylene glycol. One, that's not allowed, but two, again, now you're starting to put more of that antifreeze, that ignitable liquid. You might have a dangerous situation in your hands. The first thing that's going to come out when that sprinkler goes on is going to be that combustible liquid potentially. So we got to make sure that we have adequate freeze protection, but not too much antifreeze, or it's going to be too concentrated and cause an issue. And again, things can happen as it sits in there. I talked about dilution. As far as getting too concentrated, I can have that antifreeze separate from the water, settle out of solution, if you will. So we're going to monitor for that. So that's why we need to do it. We got to make sure we have freeze protection, but we're not driving it too far the other way where, oh, I got great freeze protection, but I got too concentrated of a solution. Now, when are you going to do it? So now you understand why we're doing it. When are we going to do this? In NFPA 25, and it's been like this for several editions, you're going to always check that annually. And normally that's going to be at the onset of freezing conditions. I think in the most recent edition, they added this phrase, toward the beginning of the heating season. What they're trying to get at with all this, the phrasing, and they're massaging this phrasing, is really just before you're going to need it, make sure you test it, right? So do it annually, but don't do it in the middle of summer. You're not going to need it until the fall. Here in Minnesota, maybe sooner than other people, but you're going to make sure you test it before it's actually going to need to be put through its paces. So every year we're going to take it and we're going to get it tested. Now, with one caveat, I'm still on the when to test it. You're only going to test it if your records indicate it's still a type that is still permitted. I've talked about the additions, things have changed over the years. If you look at your records, whether that be the antifreeze information sign, maintenance records, even info from the owner, no, we put in ethylene glycol in there. Okay, that's no longer allowed. No point in testing it then. You're not required to test it then. If you already know it's not going to be acceptable, you do not need to test. So you're going to test it every year if the records indicate, yes, this is potentially something that is still allowed in the NFPA standards. So we know why we got to test it. We got to have a freeze protection, but we can't be too combustible. We know when we're going to do it. We're going to do it every year before we need it, before that freezing season, if the records still indicate it needs to be done. Now, how do I go about testing, and how do I go about taking my sample? Let's start there. All right, so NFPA does provide clear guidelines on where we're supposed to take a sample. And you're always, no matter what, going to take from the top and the bottom of your system. Why are we doing that? I talked about before, things can happen to antifreeze solution as it sits in your system. Again, I could have some dilution, or I could have some separating out of the antifreeze itself, the glycerin, the propylene glycol in the water. If I have that separate that out, they're going to form little pockets of propylene glycol concentrate, and then the water, which is less dense, is going to sit up top. So if I take a top and bottom, I'm going to help, or I'm going to identify those separation issues. If the top and bottom are the same, great. It's uniform throughout, hopefully. That's a good indicator. But if I take the top and bottom, and again, the top looks like water and the bottom is all of a sudden really concentrated, oh, we've got an issue where it separates out of solution. So that's why at minimum we're going to take in the top and bottom. We're going to take the most remote. Generally, this would probably be your top sample. And we're also going to take a water supply connection if, again, it's not in that top and bottom. So generally, your water supply is your bottom. So in a lot of cases, we're just taking that top and bottom. But if for some reason the top of your system isn't the most remote, or the bottom isn't the water supply, you are expected to make sure all 4 of these are represented in your sample set that you send to us. So again, most remote, we want to make sure when we filled the system all the way at the end, it did get adequate freeze protection. And then why are we checking at that water supply? Again, if you've got any sort of leak, if you got water leaking in, you're diluting it down, you're not going to have the freeze protection you need. So that's why they're checking at the water supply. And then there's always exceptions, right, with all these codes. There is one exception. You are going to potentially need to send in more samples if you have a system greater than 150 gallons. Then you're just randomly going to take another test point every 100 gallons, all right? So again, we want to make sure it's uniform throughout. That's what all this is about, top, bottom. We're making sure it's uniform throughout. And if we have a very large system and we're taking the two ends, well, maybe we need to take some in the middle. They've just set the cutoff at 150. So you may need to send in more samples. Again, most of the time, top and bottom is what does it. But if you don't have those represented in there, you're going to have to take those. And if you got a very large system, you're going to need to take some extra ones. Another exception in the code, and again, this has come in more recent ones, now that we have listed solutions, and we'll get into that listed solutions in a bit. But if you have a listed solution specifically, you're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions as well. So NFPA is always the minimum requirements. These listed solutions may come with additional requirements from the manufacturer. From my experience, most of them, they are just following NFPA 25. You look at their inspection, testing, and maintenance section in their data sheet. Typically, it'll reference pretty much the same as what 25 has, but you always want to consult that when you can. So again, I always like to start back from the beginning, reset ourselves. We talk about why we need to test it, when we got to do it, where we're going to grab our samples. So now we got our samples, great. Now what are we going to do with them? How do we do this test? And this is something that can actually be done in the field if you have the equipment. Most people do choose to utilize a lab. One, they don't have the equipment, don't want to keep it calibrated, don't understand it, or just want us to take on that liability of it. That's what we're here for. We do offer that. But you can do this in the field if you have the equipment. You're going to need to check the specific gravity. You can think of that also as density, or the refractive index. That's how it's worded in the standard. Here at the lab, we're going to check both, and I'll get into that in a moment of why we do. But you're going to check both, and you're going to compare it to what it needs to be. Now, if you have a legacy antifreeze solution, this is what I'm calling anything that was before, that was never listed, right? It was before September 2022, it's never been listed. This is what everyone used for many, many years. I'm just gonna call that legacy. This is your simple, your glycerin or your propylene glycol and water. There are tables out there, including in the annex, so in NFPA, all the NFPA documents, Annex A is explanatory material. In the Annex of 25, they have this chart within there, and it shows you here's the specific gravity and here's the expected solution and even the freeze point. So as simple as that, if you had a meter, and both of these can be purchased probably a couple $100, you can get a handheld meter out in the field, and you can check this, compare it to your chart and go, okay, if I have, say my density is 1.029, that means I have about 10% glycerin. I'm only getting the freeze protection down to 28. So it's not going to work in Minnesota here, but that's how you do it, right? You take and you find it on your chart and you go there. With listed solutions now, we're going to specifically follow whatever the data sheet says. So again, specific gravity has to fall for this. In this case, it's Tyco LFP. In this case, I have to be between 1.122 and 1.129. And if it's not, even if it's close, maybe it's 99% that product, well, still it has to fall between this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Where here we have more of a scale. All right. Refractive index as well, I talked about that. Here at the lab, not only do we have more accurate equipment, again, these handheld meters are cheap, but not as most accurate. We have more accurate, but we'll also check both. And this is why. So again, we have 1.29, our specific gravity, and we think it's glycerin. That is a 10% glycerin solution. But what we don't know, even though the record said glycerin, is, well, a couple of years ago, they switched it out for propylene glycol. The density of that at 1.28 is actually 35% propylene glycol. So one variable by itself can lead to false assumptions, if you will, false results. You need to be absolutely sure, if you're just checking one, that you know what it is. Including some of these meters have built into them a conversion where, okay, I put it in and it tells me, it doesn't give you the density, it gives you the solution. It's 10% glycerin. That's assuming you know what you have, and it is glycerin. So again, you don't know what you have, utilize a lab, we can validate, okay, this is actually propylene glycol. And then, oh yeah, you go back, you talk to the owner, oh yeah, I do remember I switched that out. All right, so just be aware, the standard just says the minimum, you just have to check one of these, but just be sure you know what you have. because also, again, this goes down to 28, whereas down here, I got a little bit more freeze protection of propylene glycol, right? Or if I was going the opposite way, I think I got 2 protection propylene glycol, but it's actually glycerin, you don't got much freeze protection at all, all right? So that's kind of the drawback from only checking one parameter. The more parameters you check, the more confident you can be. And here at the lab, again, you'll see all our reports have 2 of them. So density is the same, but these refractive indexes would be different at the same density. So that's how we're going to test it, right? We either have these meters and we keep them calibrated, or we're going to send it to a lab such as ourselves, and we'll make sure, okay, do we have what the concentration is, and then what is our freeze protection. Let's talk about the requirements. So, according to NFPA 25, the 2023 edition now, again, that's what I'm referencing, all antifreeze solutions shall utilize listed solutions. All right, now I have 2 exceptions, I'll get into that, but that point blank, it says it in there. If you go to previous editions, like the 2020 edition, they had that cutoff, right? If your state's on 2020 or 2017, it said, come September 30th, 2022, you can use a legacy solution. But after that, September 30th, 2022, you are required to use listed. Well, that's come and gone. By the 23 edition, I'm past that. All right, so now it does say you need all listed, but they heard everyone at these committees, okay? When they're talking about these standards, they heard people, hey, why do I, on that date, what changed? Why do I have to change it right then, right? So that is the exception number 1, is an existing legacy solution. So if you have a 30% glycerin solution out there, that can remain in the system, right? Remain in the system, provided it's at an adequate concentration. But as soon as you take it out, you can't put 30% glycerin back in, all right? You have to, at that point, put listed. So that's what it currently says. Again, the 2017, the 2020 edition, they don't say that. They just say at September 30th, you need listed. They're saying you need listed in 2023, but with the exception, it can remain in there until it needs to be drained for some reason, right? Either you got to do some repair or the solution fails. So it can remain in there, but as soon as we drain that, we're going to switch it out. The other change in the recent edition is the concentration allowable, all right? We're only going to allow 30% propylene glycol and 38% glycerin. Concentrations allowed in previous editions were a little bit higher. If you did a risk assessment, they've just decided, one, people aren't doing these risk assessments. It's too much risk. The concentration is a bit lower. So there is potential where you have an existing legacy system, the concentration would meet the previous edition, but no longer meet this one. And I always say, people go, wow, this standard's more strict. Well, no, because the previous editions, after September 30, 2022, you had to replace it no matter what the concentration is. Now, at least they're giving you a little wiggle room, but they did cut that down to 30% propylene glycol, 38% glycerin. So let me take that back again, just to reset ourselves. We tested it. We found, in my rough example here, my glycerin's only 10%. That's certainly, and it's an existing legacy solution, that's certainly below my 38% glycerin. That is an acceptable solution for NFPA 25. It can remain in there, but again, I drain it, now I have to replace it. But is it acceptable for you or for the end user? It only gives you 28 freeze protection. So you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at reports from us, from anyone else, when you're doing it yourself. You can have solutions that are acceptable to NFPA 25, but they don't know what your freeze point is. Is it acceptable to you? If you need to go down to -10, that 28, that's not going to cut it. So even though we say pass, it's an acceptable solution, it may not be acceptable for you. There is one other exception, doesn't come up as often, but these legacy or these pre-mixed antifreeze solutions that exceed 30%, so again, we had that limit over here, they are permitted with some ESFR sprinklers when it's listed as such. So the manufacturer would let you know with these sprinklers or this application that you can use it for that. Again, doesn't come up as often, but that is another exception where you can get around the listed antifreeze requirement. Before I go on, I wanted to share my screen again, because I get this question, and it's good for us every year we do this to look it up. So, listed, what products are listed? UL is an example of listing agency. It doesn't specifically say in 25 that it has to be listed by UL. There are some documents that say it has to be listed by UL, the standard such. But from my knowledge right now, it's a UL listing. They have the document that evaluated. That took many years to develop, and then finally get products to meet that. So let's actually look it up. If you go under Product IQ, which again, you will need a login for doing this, but you go into Antifreeze. Let's just look up the guide info here for Antifreeze. So this is Antifreeze solution for use in sprinkler systems. Gives you some generic examples. It tells us here is the basic standard they're using to evaluate these products, UL 2901. Again, can't show that to you. You do have to purchase that if you're interested in seeing that. But if we click here, View Certified Products, we can see the products that are currently listed at UL for antifreeze solution for use in fire sprinkler systems. So Lubrizol has one. We'll go in there. They have the Freeze Master. That'll go down to -12. Let's go back here. We got Noble. Noble's got one, the Firefighter 1330. That'll go down to -17. And then we have Tyco. They have two, the LFP and the LFP Plus. So LFP gets you down to -10, and the LFP Plus gets you down to -25. Now, I'm not endorsing any product over another, and there's more to it than just the freeze point, right? There's more, they offer more. I would consult their data sheets, but I'm sure that would come up if I didn't bring it up here. Well, which products are listed? How low can they go? I've shown you in real time, this is what we're working with. And the listing, again, if you get a login, you can look at some other, again, maximum application volumes, installation and use. You can find all that information there. And then, okay, so our requirements, we know what we have. Either we got one, we've got a listed product and it still meets the product data sheet, great, that can remain in service. I have a legacy solution that I can remain in there if it's below that 30 propylene glycol, 38 glycerin. What happens if not? What if I think I have listed, but it doesn't match what the data sheet says, or I know I have legacy and it's too concentrated, or it's too dilute, it's acceptable, but it doesn't give me the freeze protection I want? What are you gonna do? Well, in that case, you do need to drain the system and then refill with an acceptable solution. So you are going to have to, again, now at this point, once you put something in, at this point, you are going to have to use listed solution. And that is on any addition you have. 2017, 2020, it says after 2022, you need listed solution. So again, I think I went through these, the type, or if we can't determine it at all, you don't know what it is, records don't know what it is, you send it to us, we're like, this does not match any product we know of, then you're going to have to replace it again. No longer allowed. I talked about ethylene glycol. That's no longer allowed outside the ranges. So that is, let's just take it back to square one again to ground ourselves. We're going to test antifreeze solution because we need to know it's going to work. It's going to provide that freeze protection we need. But it is, antifreeze itself is combustible or ignitable, so we got to make sure it's not too concentrated. So that's why we're going to test it. And then, yes, of course, it is a requirement, but there's a reason why it's a requirement. Those are the reasons. Things can settle, things can get diluted, things can happen to it. Someone could do something to the system and you don't know about, and it's no longer contains any antifreeze. That's why we're going to do it. When are we going to do it? We're going to do it every year before we need it, before that freezing season when we start needing heating. So that's why we do this webinar at this time of year. This is about when, for a lot of parts of the country, you're going to go out and start taking those antifreeze samples if you have them. Again, antifreeze solution, just one mechanism, one solution you have to address the freezing problem. So we know when we're going to do it. We go and we look at the records and we go, yeah, this does look like it's still allowed. Let's get it tested. Again, at that point, if it's not allowed, you got to replace, and you'd have to replace with listed. We go and we're going to take our samples. If we think it's still allowed, we're going to take top and bottom, and then the water supply most remote, if that's not the top and bottom. And then if it's a large system, we're going to take a couple more every 100 gallons. So I got my samples, and then either you're going to do it in the field, you're going to have these meters, either a refractometer or a specific gravity, something to measure that, hydrometer. You're either going to do it yourself, or you're going to send it to a lab. We're going to check those parameters, and we're going to go, okay, yep, this looks like it's 10% glycerin, and then your freeze point's 28. And there's two parts to that, right? Is 10% allowed? Yeah, it's allowed. Is 28 good enough for you? No. Okay, you got to replace. Or we find it's too concentrated, we'll tell you got to replace it. And then you go about, again, replacing it, and if you do have to replace, I've harped on this enough, but you got to use listed antifreeze today. So it's a quick webinar. Again, it's a small section on antifreeze, but there's been a lot of change with these antifreeze systems and what we do recently. Again, specifically being, okay, now we're past that sunset date of September 30th, and then, hey, some of those concentrations on legacies dropped. So certainly available for questions. type them in the chat, Q&A, we'll look at them. I already have a couple questions. Is draining drops necessary? So I talked about, if we go back here, we found out that our system, the antifreeze is no longer allowed, it's not the right concentration, not a good, I don't have enough freeze protection. I do say to drain completely. So people ask this all the time, do I gotta drain the drops, right? That's very difficult, because now I gotta pull every sprinkler, and once I pull a sprinkler, now I can't reinstall it, I gotta put new sprinklers. Again, I'll reference you to the annex of 25, and then from my own experience talking to the manufacturers, there is in the annex that says, in most cases, it is not necessary to drain the drops. So where systems are drained in order to be refilled, it is not typically necessary to drain the drops. Most systems with drops have insufficient volume to cause a problem, even if slightly higher concentrations have collected there. But they do note for drops that exceed 36 inches, or if there's a really high concentration of antifreeze, then yeah, consider draining the drops. My conversations with the manufacturers have said the exact same thing. They probably are the ones that help put that in there, that the drops contain a, you know, when you think of it, the drop maybe 1-inch pipe, whatever you got there, versus the 3, 4, 5, 6-inch mains you got going. It's a small amount. Yes, is it gonna mix a little bit with it? A little bit, but not significantly, is what they've deemed, is what they've said, okay? Which was surprising to me. Again, whenever we're talking about listing, so now we have listed antifreeze products. So again, it's been evaluated. Gone are the days you can just buy way gone are the days you can mix it up yourself, buy propylene glycol and water. I mean, that was an issue because people wouldn't mix it up enough, it would fall out of solution. And then we went to factory premixed, right, where all of a sudden, well, the manufacturer will premix it to make sure it stays in solution. And then now we moved to listing where they're actually putting some additives in there that help it stay in solution. So, do you have to drain the drops? No. Well, I would say maybe. You know, if you, again, you got 36 inches, you got 100% glycerin, that's gonna be a problem, right? You're gonna wanna drain those. But in most cases, according to NFPA, the annex, you do not need to. And again, same thing, my conversations with the manufacturer, you shouldn't need to. Can listed antifreeze be used outside of its size limitations? Yeah, that's a good question too. Let me show you again. Hopefully I left it up. They're talking about the size limitation. Again, here I'm just showing the last one I had up, which was LFP+. They talk about different applications, like here if we take NFPA 13 design criteria, it's listed for less than 40 gallons, less than or equal to a 40-gallon system. For some of you out there, maybe that's not, you know, you got a bigger system, you want to use this. They do make, in the 2023 edition, they pull that up. Yeah, where used to replace a legacy solution, listed shall be permitted to be used outside that limitation, provided the temperature range is not exceeded, which makes sense, right? You can't go outside the temperature range, it's going to freeze and cause you problems, but they are allowing a caveat. That's right in the 2023 edition. If you have a 50-gallon system, they are allowing you to use it outside the listing for now. I think they understand that, hey, we only have a couple products. Right now, they've only been tested up to a certain amount. We can allow that exception. So that's a good question that is in the document. I think in time, maybe those may get bigger. The freeze point is the freeze point. Again, you can't put it in. If you only go down to -10, you need -20. This just isn't a solution for you anymore. Maybe there used to be more concentrated glycerine solutions in the past that would work for you. But this is what we have today to still meet, again, that listing. That listing's gone evaluated, again, that potential risk of it fueling the fire, and there are certain limits to meet that standard that it has to hit. What antifreeze can be used with CPVC? I believe just glycerin, or listed or glycerin, what the document calls out. So ethylene glycol is not allowed in any system, but propylene glycol, a legacy system, in some cases, you know, if it's remaining, it can remain in there, but you can't use it with CPVC. I believe it's a compatibility issue. So just glycerin is what 25 says, but always, whatever material you're using, consult the manufacturer for that. Let me switch over to a different window here. If any other.
Some coming in directly to me, I think was the way I said.
Yeah, go ahead and read them off for me then.
So are there options for antifreeze systems in the northern climates since there isn't a listed antifreeze?
No. If you mean northern climates, like Minnesota, that's where I'm at, if you weren't aware. I went through all the listed products. Let me show it again on screen that are currently at UL, they're listed at UL. I think I went through them. Lubrizol, -12. I think the highest was LFP plus, but -25. If you need to go more than -25, then no, antifreeze is not a solution for you. There's no exception for that freeze point where, you need -30, yeah, you can use glycerin. That's not in there, So they would expect you at this point, you'd have to use some other solution. Again, either dry system, insulation, heat tracing, you'd have to find some other way to protect it, which sucks, right? That's a hassle. That's a lot of money to retrofit these systems. But I think they would argue too, this has been a long time coming. Everyone kind of put it off to last minute, including the manufacturers. There wasn't a listed product until pretty close to that 2022, September 30th, 2022 date. But there is some products now, so those are what we got. I guarantee you there's a lot of people like you that I wish it went lower, and I'm sure the manufacturers are trying to make products lower. It's only to their benefit. They just haven't found the formula that, hey, I can get it lower, but then it won't meet the UL listing, that 2901 standard. In there's a fire test, and I'm sure they monitor, okay, the concentration, the freeze protection is great, but boy, it fuels that fire. So is there a solution if you need to go lower, -25? Not in the listed antifreeze world. There's no exceptions or other ways to get around that.
After changing out antifreeze, is there a typical amount of time it is usually good for? 3 years, 5 years, et cetera?
I would consult the easy out for me is I consult the manufacturer data sheet, but it's just, especially these listed products, again, now some of them have additives in them, and sometimes that additives can be to help keep it in solution. So it's just a chemical, it's just a mixture. Nothing should really be happening to it chemically. I can't picture anything that all of a sudden it's going to break down into this or that, but our main concern is separating out, again, where water has gone in and diluted it, or it has settled out to all of a sudden now I got 2 layers. I got a pocket of straight ignitable, flammable antifreeze, and then just water, which gives me no freeze protection. So how long is it good for? As long as you don't dilute it and it stays in solution, it should be a good amount of time. But again, consult the manufacturer data sheet for that. Ask the manufacturer that. What testing have they done to show that it will stay in solution for an extended period of time? But just keep in mind, you got to test it every year. So you're always going to check that every year. And it should, if we didn't think it would last a year, NFPA, and I can't, now with Global Solutions, I can't comment and make any changes myself. But the public would comment that, hey, these don't even last a year. We need to test this more often. So, and opposite true, if we go past a year, maybe they could push it, but I think the year cut off every year before freezing. Let's just double check it. Things happen. Again, we don't want frozen pipes and all that damage. So that's how I'll answer that. Consult the data sheet, but there's nothing, if you treat it right, it should last a while. But again, there are reasons you're going to have to drain it anyways, to, again, whether 5-year inspection or you got to do a repair. So, you got any more, Jenny?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are backflows with RPZ required in expansion tank? Does the loop need to be redesigned if you're recharging with the new listed antifreeze?
Again, I'll point you to the manufacturer for that one. I don't get too much into the design of the system itself, more of the chemical. So I would, whatever product you do end up going with, again, don't care what product, no skin in the game in that. Whatever product you do end up going with, consult them. And I will say all of their manufacturers' data sheets are great regarding the installation, not just the maintenance, but even the installation. They'll talk about what you need for that.
There's a question directly related to the lab, so this is a good one. What's the minimum volume a sample needs to be to send to the lab for testing? 12 ounces, 16 ounces? Our containers are?
Our containers are 250 mils.
8 ounces, I think.
Which I think is about 8 ounces. I'll quickly type that in. In science, we always work in mils. We don't. So yeah, it's 8 ounces. So 8 ounces, and that's more than enough. The absolute minimum. we're just using the same bottle, style that we use for foam for that. You could probably even a little bit less, but never good to skimp when you give to the lab. You know, nothing's more irritating than when you go to test it and you just don't have enough to do that test. But 8 ounces is more than enough, again, to do the density, refractive index. We'll actually throw it in a freezer. We take about 10 mils for that. So, yeah. We asked for 250 mils, 8 ounces. I'm sure a couple ounces we could get it done, but it's just best to make sure you give a sufficient amount.
I don't have anything else direct coming to me right now. Do you have anything else on your side there?
I'm not seeing it.
Anybody else have any questions?
Otherwise, let me, before we, and it's a shorter one, Antifreeze usually is, but let me get my info on screen. If for some reason you didn't want to ask it right now in front of everyone, or you think of something later, here's my contact info. Write it down. You can also, if you call, you know, we're growing, but we still, if you call, you can get a hold of me here. So you can give me a call or email me if you'd like, ask me some questions. And just like that other guy, don't claim to know everything, but I usually can help you get to the person who may know it, right? So if I can't answer it, I'll usually pass you off to someone. I have some connections to get you to if you need an answer.
All right. Well, we're waiting for any more questions to come in. I'll just give you my little wrap up here, and if something happens to pop up, we'll get to it. We appreciate your being here. We'll be sending you a survey and appreciate your feedback, including any future topics you'd like us to cover. We also send a link to the recording, as I mentioned. Our next webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, October 16th, which is on the DropMaster D12. It's our tool that helps you easily replace sprinkler heads with our patented siphoning system, and it removes trapped water and drops. So that helps you improve your productivity and profitability, and we talk a lot about that in that webinar. There will also be a link in my email to register for that if you'd like to jump on the next one. And as always, watch our Dyne website, our LinkedIn or Facebook pages, and our monthly newsletter for more information. That is usually where we put things like webinars and that type of thing, what's coming up. Yeah, anything else pop up for you?
No questions, but you bring up a good point, the DropMaster product. I can show that video right here. If you aren't familiar, yeah, we do manufacture. It's the one thing we do, right? We're always very conscious about, we don't want any skin in the game. We don't pass something because it's our product, we want it to look good. We don't fail something because, oh, we want to sell you a new product. So we don't have anything like that, but we do have one product, and all it's designed to do is help you take sprinkler down easier. But that could also be applicable for this antifreeze. Again, you might have to take a sprinkler down, and this product could help you. And then also, if you are really trying to drain that system completely, this will do it. Again, you pull the sprinkler and let that air run by it. So let me actually pull that up. This is spur of the moment, so I hope it works. Sometimes I'm going to pull it up on my screen and then share it. Sometimes when you do things spur of the moment, we don't test it, they don't work as well. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And then I think I got to play my audio so you can hear me. And that's me right there you can see it. That's a live reaction of me getting sprinkler system water down my backside as it's coming out of there. So this is without the DropMaster.
No more buckets and tarps. No more water or smell. No more hassle. The DropMaster DM12 makes replacing sprinklers easy. After draining your sprinkler system, simply connect the DM12 to your drain and wait for the system to get to vacuum before proceeding with your removal of sprinklers. The air pulled through the sprinkler system by the DM12 and the vacuum it creates will carry trapped water with it. The pump inside the DM12 will then discharge the collected water where you want it. When done for the day, drain any remaining water in the drum. Drain any oil collected from the muffler. Top off the oil in the vacuum head reservoir and clean the Y strainer basket on the suction line. This will ensure your DM12 remains in good working order and is ready to go for the next job. And built to last right here in the United States. The DropMaster DM12 will quickly become one of your favorite tools. Order yours today Contact Dyne Fire Protection Labs for current pricing information and lead times. Parts and repair services are also available.
So if you haven't ever seen that product before, then maybe it's eye-opening, but that can help you, again, take sprinklers down without the mess. And in this case, too, with antifreeze, you could, again, if you're trying to drain all those drops, you still got to pull the sprinkler, but the water going by would take it up with it. Just in this case, we probably wouldn't put that on the ground, right? We'd probably capture that. You'd take that discharge line, just put it in a tote or something, whatever you got to capture it in. Again, always follow state and local regulations there.
We got one comment on the Drop Master. Thanks, Eric. He says, Drop Master is awesome and a must-have. Appreciate the endorsement.
Yeah.
Can I use it on the website? I like that.
Yeah, thanks for the, so this was a product that's been around quite a while. If you knew Jerry Klum, Gecko Inc., it was the father, and then Jerry had it for quite some time, and then, we acquired it about a year and a half ago, I think last May. Again, it just fits so well with what we do. Again, if you're taking sprinklers down to have them tested or messing with antifreeze, this can help you get that done. So the easier it is, I mean, that's everything with our service. We try to make it easier. So I should mention that too. If you are interested in us testing your antifreeze solution, again, you call, just like call, email, website. It's like all our other services. We offer a free kit. In this case, antifreeze, very similar to foam. It's a box with some bottles in it. It's got a bag to make sure when in transit it doesn't leak. You get that in the United States. It's a free kit no matter where you are. In the U.S., we'll even ship it to you for free and include free return shipping back to us. And then contact us for pricing, always just to get the most up to date on that. But yeah, it's a very simple process. Again, you don't want to deal with these meters. You don't understand them. You don't want to keep them calibrated, or you just want a third party. I don't want this liability. I want the lab. Or you got a building owner. We have this all the time with sprinklers. Grant, I told them they're going to fail, but they won't listen to me. They want a lab and they want a report that says they fail. Okay, you can utilize us for that. We got a free kit we can send you, free shipping both ways, very simple. Just get us the sample and we get you that report. Refractive, density, freeze point, percent concentration. We do have a listed verification as well. So if you aren't sure if you have a listed product, hopefully you have good records, but I understand how it is out there. These records sometimes are hard to find. If you aren't sure if you have a listed product, we can actually tell you. So I can give you a thumbs up or thumbs down. I can't tell you what's in it. I'm under NDA for that. But I can go and take your product, I run it through the machines, and I can go, okay, here are the additives in there, here's what it looks like. Does this match one of the listed products? So I know what all the listed products contain. And again, I can give you a thumbs down, like, yes, this is one of the listed products, or no, it's not. And not that you need to have a listed member. You can use legacy according to the current edition. So even if your state's several editions behind, I think any HJ, say, hey, I'm following the most current version, this, they do allow this exception. You could probably get that through, that existing solution can remain in the system, but as soon as you got to take it out, then you got to replace it.
One more question came up. What are they testing the new UL listed solutions with, a refractometer or a hydrometer?
Same thing, either one. Now, again, let me go back here. Let me show you. This is a data sheet for Tyco LFP. All of them, LFP Plus, the Lubrizols, the Nobles, they all have something that looks similar to this, that has a specific gravity refractive index. You can use either. The document, NFPA 25, says you can use either for periodical purposes. If you're talking listing, at point of listing, boy, it's much more than just checking this, right? Fire tests, corrosion tests. I mean, it's a lot. But periodic purposes, you just check either one of these. Now, again, I'd argue you should check both, because, again, I brought up, again, if my density is 1.29, that by itself, I could be either one of these legacy solutions, right? I can either have 10% glycerin or I could have 35% propylene glycol. But if I also check the refractive index, now, okay, because each of those will have, at that density, they'll have different refractive indexes. Again, the more properties you check, the more sure you can be of what you have. But if you got records, maybe you did it last year. You're the contractor out there last year. You know you put in glycerin. No one's touched the system. Then, okay, yep, you know it's glycerin. You can go with that. But the listed product, same thing. We're just checking refractive and specific gravity. It's just the requirements are specific to those products. This table I showed here, this is only for legacy solutions. Each listed is gonna have its own. You gotta consult the product data sheet, which are free. You can go on and get that. You don't have to, that UL site I showed you, you don't have to go on there for that. When you buy the product, it obviously should come with some data sheets, but you can go pull them off the website as well and just make sure it lines up. But again, if you're below it even just a little bit, then you are expected to replace it. Or above it for some reason. But again, above it either means it's fallen out of solution and you concentrated it somewhere, but you should see a difference then. If you have it concentrated somewhere, that means you have it unconcentrated somewhere else. It had to pull it from somewhere else. Or if it's high, a lot of times it's just not what you think it is. Again, someone's done something you didn't know about, changed it up without you knowing. Any other questions?
I've not seen anything else, so feel free to email us afterwards if something comes up.
Get my contact info on the screen. But otherwise, I think, yeah, we call it there. You guys reach out if you have any further questions. I'd be happy to help you.
Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.